Valentina Mendoza was 35 years old and had a red Ferrari worth more than the house of most people she knew. That August Friday, she was driving on a back road on the outskirts of Madrid when the engine began to make a strange noise and the car came to a sudden stop. Smoke was pouring from under the hood. Her phone had no signal, and she was sitting on the hot asphalt in her designer heels and silk blouse, without the slightest idea of what to do. Then he appeared. A boy of about 4, wearing a striped t-shirt and jean shorts, walking alone along the shoulder of the road. He stopped in front of her, looked at her with those huge eyes that children have when they're sure of something, and pointed toward the smoke coming from her Ferrari. He said the words that would change Valentina's life forever. He said his dad could fix it. Valentina looked at this little boy alone on a road in the middle of nowhere, offering her his father's help as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And something in her heart, that heart she had closed off years ago after too many disappointments, began to beat differently. If you're ready for this story, write in the comments where you're watching this video from. Valentina Mendoza had built an empire from nothing. The daughter of Mexican immigrants who had arrived in Spain with little more than dreams and determination, she had grown up in a humble neighborhood in Vallecas, sharing a room with her 3 siblings and learning from an early age that if she wanted something in life, she would have to get it herself. Her father had worked as a bricklayer, her mother cleaning other people's houses, and Valentina had promised that one day she would give them the life they deserved. At 18, she started working at a small tech company while studying at night at the university. She slept 4 hours, lived on coffee and cheap sandwiches, and never complained because she knew every sacrifice brought her closer to her goal. At 25, she founded her own software startup with money she had saved for years. At 32, after endless nights and obstacles that would have defeated anyone else, she sold that company for 150 million euros and became one of the richest women in Spain. Her parents weren't there to see it. Her father had died of a heart attack when she was 27, and her mother had followed him 2 years later, unable to live without him. Valentina had paid for the best doctors, the best hospitals, but money couldn't buy more time with the people she loved. Now she lived in a penthouse in the Salamanca district with views of El Retiro Park. She drove cars that cost more than apartments. She traveled first class to exotic destinations and dined in restaurants where a bottle of wine cost more than the monthly salary of her old Vallecas neighbors. She had everything she had ever dreamed of having, and none of what she truly needed. But Valentina was also alone. She'd had relationships, of course, men drawn to her beauty, her success, her money. Men who wanted something from her, always wanted something. The first was a lawyer who turned out to have gambling debts. The second, an actor who just wanted her to finance his career. The last had been Carlos, a businessman who turned out to be more interested in her contacts and bank account than in her as a person. When she discovered that 3 years ago, she decided love wasn't for her, that it was easier to be alone than to risk being used again. That Friday in August, Valentina was driving to Toledo for a business meeting with international investors. She had chosen to take the back road instead of the highway because she liked driving her Ferrari on winding roads, feeling the engine's power, the freedom of speed. The Castilian landscape stretched out on both sides, fields golden from the summer sun, ancient olive trees, small towns that seemed frozen in time. It was one of the few pleasures she allowed herself, one of the few moments when she felt truly alive. But then the engine began to fail. First a strange noise, like a metallic groan she'd never heard before. Then a shudder, and another stronger one, and suddenly the car had stopped completely, the engine coughing as if choking. Valentina had managed to coast it to the shoulder before it died completely, and now she was sitting on the ground next to her broken-down Ferrari, watching smoke pour from under the hood and wondering how a 300,000 euro car could leave her stranded in the middle of nowhere. Her designer purse was beside her. Her top-of-the-line phone, useless, without a signal. She had tried walking a few yards in each direction, holding the device up to the sky as if that would help, but nothing. She was completely isolated on a road where barely any cars passed, with the August sun beating down on her mercilessly and the asphalt so hot she could feel it through her clothes. That's when she saw the boy. The little one was walking along the shoulder of the road with the calm of someone who knows the way, his sneakers kicking up little clouds of dust with each step. He wore a blue and white striped t-shirt, jean shorts, and in his hand he held a little toy car that was, ironically, red like Valentina's Ferrari. Valentina stood up immediately, alarmed. A child that age shouldn't be walking alone on a road. She looked around for an adult, a parent, someone who might be with him, but there was no one. Just the boy, the road, and the heat of the Castilian summer. The little boy stopped in front of her and looked at the Ferrari with obvious interest. Then he looked at the smoke coming from the hood, and finally he looked at Valentina with those brown eyes that seemed too wise for his age, and then he said that his dad could fix it. Valentina didn't know what to say. She was torn between concern for this clearly alone child and confusion at his offer of help. She asked him what his name was, and he answered that he was Lucas, with the pride little kids have when introducing themselves. She asked where his dad was, and Lucas pointed toward a dirt road branching off from the main road, barely visible between the home oaks and pine trees. He told her his dad had a workshop there that fixed cars, lots of cars of all colors and sizes, that he was the best at fixing cars in the whole world, better than anyone, and that he could surely fix her red car too. Valentina looked where the boy was pointing. She couldn't see any workshop, any house, nothing except trees and the dirt road that disappeared among them like a dusty snake. But she didn't have many options either. Her phone didn't work, her car was dead, and she couldn't just sit on the shoulder waiting for someone who could help her to come by while the sun beat down mercilessly. Besides, this boy was alone and she couldn't just leave him. It didn't matter who she was or where she came from. No child should be alone on a road. She told Lucas to take her to his dad. The boy smiled, a huge smile that lit up his face and showed a missing front tooth, and extended his small hand to take hers. Valentina felt something strange when those little fingers closed around hers, something she hadn't felt in a long time: trust. Pure and simple trust from a child who knew nothing about her except that she needed help. They walked together down the dirt road, Valentina trying not to ruin her €500 heels on the uneven ground, Lucas chattering about his dad and how good he was at fixing things, about his toy car that was just as red as hers, about the neighbor's dog named Canelo. The workshop appeared after about a 10-minute walk. It was a modest building, an old farmhouse converted into a garage, with several old cars parked outside and the sound of tools coming from inside. A hand-painted sign in fading letters read Taller Mecanico Navarro. Lucas let go of Valentina's hand and ran toward the workshop, shouting that he had found a lady with a broken red car. A man came out from inside, wiping his hands on a dirty rag, and Valentina felt the world stop for a moment. He was handsome in a way that has nothing to do with expensive clothes or beauty products. He was in his 30s, with messy dark hair, a few days stubble, and intense green eyes that looked at her with a mix of curiosity and concern. He wore work overalls stained with grease and worn-out boots, and his hands showed the signs of years of physical labor. He wasn't the type of man Valentina usually associated with. He didn't wear a designer watch, he didn't drive luxury cars. He probably didn't know the difference between a Chateau Margaux and supermarket wine. But there was something about him, something in the way he looked first at his son to make sure he was okay, and then at her with an expression of genuine willingness to help. He introduced himself as Daniel Navarro. He listened as Valentina explained the situation. Her broken-down Ferrari on the road, her phone with no signal, her need to get to Toledo for a meeting. He didn't seem impressed by the Ferrari or intimidated by her obvious wealth. He simply nodded and said he would go take a look. Lucas insisted on going with them, and Daniel put him on his shoulders for the walk back to the road. Valentina walked beside them, listening as father and son talked to each other, the jokes they shared, the natural way they related. When they got to the Ferrari, Daniel put Lucas down and told him to stay with the lady while he looked at the car. The boy obeyed without protest, sitting on the ground next to Valentina and showing her his little red toy car while his father leaned over the smoking engine. Valentina watched Daniel work. His movements were sure, precise, those of someone who intimately knew how engines worked. After a few minutes, he straightened up and gave her the diagnosis. It was a problem with the cooling system, nothing serious, but it needed parts he didn't have at the workshop. He could tow the car there and call a Ferrari specialist, but that would take at least a day, probably 2. The meeting in Toledo was out of the question. Valentina felt a stab of frustration, but also something else. A strange feeling that maybe being stranded here in this lost place with this mechanic and his son wasn't the disaster it should be. Daniel offered to let her use the phone in his workshop to make whatever calls she needed. He told her she could stay at his house while she waited. He had a guest room nobody used. His tone was practical, without ulterior motives, simply a man offering help to someone who needed it. That night, after Valentina had cancelled her meeting and rearranged her schedule for the coming days, she sat in Daniel's kitchen while he made dinner. Lucas was already in bed, worn out after a day of excitement, and the house was quiet except for the sound of the frying pan and the conversation that flowed between them with surprising ease. The house was small but cozy, clearly decorated with more attention to comfort than style. There were photos of Lucas everywhere, from babyhood to now, and children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with colorful magnets. But Valentina noticed something else. There were empty spaces on the walls, lighter patches where other photos had clearly been hung but were no longer there, photos of someone who had been erased from the present, but not from the past. Daniel told her his story as he cooked, his hands working with the same precision he used in the workshop. He had been a mechanical engineer working for an automotive company in Madrid, designing engine systems for luxury cars. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. He had been married to Elena, his college sweetheart, a literature teacher who wrote poetry in her free time. Together they had Lucas. Life was good, or so he thought. They had an apartment in Chimbury, plans to buy a house with a garden, dreams of more children and vacations and a future together. Then Elena got sick. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed too late when there was nothing left to do but wait. The doctors said she had months, but she had weeks. She died when Lucas was 2 years old, too young to remember her, but old enough to feel her absence, to ask for mommy for months after she was gone. Daniel couldn't return to the life he had before. The company, the Madrid apartment where they had been happy, the colleagues who didn't know what to say to him, the places they had walked together, everything reminded him of her. So he sold everything, took his savings, and bought this workshop in the middle of nowhere, a place where he could raise his son in peace, where he could work with his hands instead of his head, where the grief was more manageable because there weren't memories of Elena around every corner. They had been there for 2 years. Lucas was happy. He had made friends in the nearby village of Aldea Nueva. He went to a small school where everyone knew each other and the teachers treated every child as their own. Daniel had found a kind of peace, not happiness exactly, but a calm that allowed him to move forward, raise his son, find satisfaction in a job well done. Valentina listened in silence, feeling how each of Daniel's words resonated in places in her heart she had kept closed for years. She, too, had lost things. Not a loved one, but faith in people, the ability to trust, the hope of finding someone who would love her for who she was and not for what she had. She had lost her parents, she had lost relationships, she had lost parts of herself in the process of becoming the successful woman everyone admired. When Daniel finished speaking, she told her own story. She told him about Vallecas, the small apartment where she and her 3 siblings grew up with 2 parents, the smell of her mother's cooking that meant home. She told him how she had built her company from scratch, the sleepless nights and the sacrifices and the determination no one saw. She told him about the men who had disappointed her, the loneliness she felt in her luxury penthouse, where the silence was so deep she sometimes turned on the TV just to hear human voices. She told him how she sometimes wondered if all the money in the world was worth it if she had no one to share it with, no one waiting for her at the end of the day, no one who knew how she liked her coffee in the morning or what songs made her cry. It was the first time in years Valentina had talked to someone like that, without filters, without calculating what image she was projecting, without wondering what this person might want from her. Daniel listened with genuine attention, without judgment, without offering unsolicited advice, simply present. And that presence, that ability to listen without an agenda, was something Valentina didn't know how much she needed until she had it. What was supposed to be 2 days turned into 5. The Ferrari specialist had to order parts from Italy, and Valentina discovered she didn't mind waiting. She cancelled more meetings, delegated more responsibilities, and allowed herself something she hadn't allowed herself in years: time. Time to have breakfast with Lucas, who had decided Valentina was his new best friend and dragged her into all his adventures, showing her his secret places, the tree where he had seen an owl, the stream where there were sometimes frogs, the hill from where you could see the whole town. Time to walk through the fields surrounding the workshop, discovering landscapes she didn't know existed so close to Madrid. Time to sit on the porch in the evenings, talking with Daniel until the stars appeared in the Castilian sky, brighter than she had ever seen them from her light-polluted penthouse. Valentina helped Lucas with his summer homework, discovering she was surprisingly good at explaining math to a 4-year-old, using his toy cars to teach him to add and subtract. And the boy learned quickly, proud to show his father what he had learned. She learned to make a Spanish omelette following Daniel's instructions. And though her first attempt was a disaster that ended up in the trash, the second was edible and the third was genuinely good, so good that Lucas asked for seconds. She took off her heels and walked barefoot in the grass, feeling the earth under her feet for the first time in years. She got her clothes dirty playing with Lucas in the yard. She laughed with a freedom she had forgotten she possessed. Daniel taught her things about engines she had never wanted to know, but that turned out to be fascinating when he explained them. He showed her how to change a car's oil, how to identify problems by the sound of the engine, how machines have their own language if you know how to listen. Valentina discovered she liked getting her hands dirty, that there was something deeply satisfying in fixing things instead of just buying new ones. It was like returning to her roots, to the Valentina who had grown up in Vallecas before money had separated her from the real world. Lucas watched them with that intuition children have for important things. He smiled when he saw them together. He asked questions that seemed innocent but revealed a deep understanding of what was happening. One night, as Valentina was tucking him in because Daniel was finishing an urgent job, the boy asked her if she was going to be his new mom. Valentina was speechless. She looked into those brown eyes watching her with hope, so much like his father's, and felt something break inside her, not from pain, but from opening up. Like a door that had been closed so long she had forgotten it existed, suddenly swinging open to let in the light. She told Lucas she didn't know what would happen, but that she loved him very much and would always be his friend, no matter what. The boy seemed satisfied with that answer, closed his eyes, and fell asleep with a smile on his lips and his little red toy car clutched to his chest. When Valentina left the room, Daniel was waiting for her in the hallway. He had overheard the conversation, and in his eyes there was something she recognized because she felt it too. Fear and hope, and the possibility of something neither of them had expected to find. The Ferrari was fixed. The parts had arrived from Italy, the specialist had done his work, and the car purred like new. Valentina could go back to her life, to her penthouse in Salamanca, to her meetings and her travels and her elegant solitude. But she didn't want to. She stayed another week, inventing excuses no one believed. Then another week, and another, until she stopped making excuses and simply stayed. She worked from Daniel's kitchen with Lucas playing at her feet and the sound of the workshop as background music. She discovered she could run her empire from anywhere, that video calls worked just as well from a lost town in Castile as from a Madrid skyscraper. 1 month after her Ferrari broke down on that road, Valentina told Daniel she loved him. They were sitting on the porch, as they did every night, and the words came out before she could stop them. He didn't answer immediately, and for one terrible moment she thought she had made a mistake. But then Daniel took her hand, the same hand his son had taken that first day on the road, and told her he loved her too, that he had tried not to because he was afraid of losing someone again, but that she had come into his life like that red Ferrari had come onto his road. unexpectedly, and changing everything. Valentina didn't sell her company or abandon her career, but she did sell the Salamanca penthouse and bought a bigger house near the workshop, a house with room for a family that was learning to be one. She divided her time between Madrid and this lost town, between business meetings and family dinners, between the successful woman she had built and the woman in love she had discovered. Lucas called her mom for the first time on the day she married Daniel, a small ceremony in the garden of their new house with only family and close friends. The spring sun shone over the Castilian fields, and the wildflowers Lucas had picked that morning decorated the makeshift tables. Valentina cried when she heard that word come from the boy's lips. She cried as she hadn't cried in years, tears that weren't of sadness, but of a happiness so great it couldn't fit inside her. Daniel had tears in his eyes, too. He had put his first wedding band in a drawer next to the photos of Elena, which Lucas now looked at with natural curiosity instead of sadness. He wasn't replacing Elena, he never could, but he was building something new, something different, something Elena would have wanted for him and for their son. 2 years later, Sophia was born. A girl with her father's green eyes and her mother's determination, who came into the world screaming as if she already had something important to say. Lucas became the most devoted big brother in the world, proud of his little sister and his blended family that had begun with a broken-down Ferrari and a boy in a striped t-shirt who knew his dad could fix anything. Valentina didn't leave her businesses. She continued running her empire, but differently. She hired more staff, delegated more responsibilities, and accepted that work wasn't the only important thing in her life. She traveled less, declined more meetings, and never forgot that at the end of the day, there was a house in the middle of the Castilian fields where the people she loved most were waiting for her. Valentina kept the Ferrari in a garage Daniel built especially for it. She maintained it in perfect condition. She took it out for drives on back roads from time to time, feeling the engine's power and the freedom of speed, but it was no longer her most valuable possession. Now she had things worth more than any car, more than any amount of money, more than all the success she had accumulated in her life. She had a family. Sometimes, when she drove down the road where it all began, she stopped at the very spot where the car had broken down years before. She looked at the dirt road that led to the workshop, now expanded and prosperous, thanks to a silent investment Daniel never knew came from her, and smiled, thinking about how a moment of bad luck had turned into the best luck of her life. Lucas, now a teenager who had inherited his father's mechanical skill, sometimes accompanied her on those drives. He told her stories about the day he found her on the road, stories he remembered with the clarity only life-changing moments have. Lucas had been right that day. His dad could fix anything. But what neither of them knew then was that he wasn't just going to fix a Ferrari, he was going to fix 2 broken hearts that didn't know they needed mending. And that, Valentina thought as she drove back home with the sun setting over the fields of Castile, painting the sky orange and pink, was the best piece of mechanics Daniel Navarro had ever done. If this story made you believe that sometimes the wrong turns lead us exactly where we need to be, leave a little heart to let me know. And if you chose to stay until the end, it means stories like this touch something true in you. For those who wish to support these stories, there is the option to leave a super thanks through the feature below. Every gesture counts, just like Lucas's gesture of pointing toward his father's workshop counted for more than anyone could have imagined. Because you chose to stay until the very last word, and that makes you part of this story.